That sound. You've heard it 100,000 times. Grocery store, gas station, pharmacy, airport. That flat little beep that means you may now leave with this item. It is, statistically, one of the most heard sounds on Earth. 5 billion times a day, somewhere on the planet, that beep goes off. And almost nobody knows the story behind it. Here's the strange part. The thing making that sound, those black and white stripes on every product you own, isn't some tidy Silicon Valley success story. It's a 25-year fight. A patent that sat unused for 2 decades. A group of the world's biggest companies trying to kill each other's version of a stripe pattern in a hotel conference room. And an inventor who watched his own idea almost die 3 separate times before a pack of chewing gum finally saved it. I'm going to flag all 3 of those near deaths as we go, so keep count. This is the case file on the Barcode. If this is your first Origin Desk case file, welcome. We dig up the wild, true stories behind the objects you use without ever thinking about. There's 9 more of these coming. Rewind to the 1930s. Grocery stores are changing shape. They're getting bigger. Self-service is becoming the norm, and for the first time, customers are wandering the aisles themselves instead of handing a list to a clerk behind a counter. That's convenient for shoppers. It's a nightmare for the business.
Thank you, ma'am.
Every item has to be priced by hand. Every checkout is a clerk squinting at a sticker, punching numbers into a register, one item at a time, all day.
Do you have any fresh
Mistakes are constant. Lines are long.
All right, I'll take
In
it down
1932, a supermarket executive named Wallace Flint floated an idea. What if a machine could just know what the product was? Nobody could figure out how. Not for another 16 years. In 1948, a Drexel Institute of Technology graduate student named Bernard Silver overheard a supermarket executive begging his school's dean for help with exactly this problem.
Get out.
Silver brought the challenge to a friend, a 27-year-old grad school dropout named Norman Joseph Woodland. Woodland was intrigued enough to quit his teaching job, cash in some stock market savings, and move into his grandparents' apartment in Miami Beach for the winter, just to sit and think about the problem full-time. One day, sitting in a beach chair, doing nothing but turning the question over in his head, Woodland thought back to something he'd learned as a Boy Scout. Morse code. Dots and dashes. He pushed his 4 fingers into the sand and pulled them toward himself. 4 lines. And then, this is the part that sounds made up, but it isn't. "Ah!" he said, out loud, to no one. "Golly, now I have 4 lines, and they could be wide lines and narrow lines instead of dots and dashes." He'd just invented the concept of the barcode. In the sand, on a beach, by accident. Woodland and Silver refined it into a target-shaped pattern, a bullseye of concentric rings, since a circle could theoretically be scanned from any angle. On October 20th, 1949, they filed a patent for classifying apparatus and method. It was granted in 1952. He'd just solved the problem. Nobody on Earth would be ready to use his solution for another 25 years. Here's the problem with being 20 years ahead of your time. The world has to catch up, and it doesn't care how good your idea is while it waits. Reading Woodland's bullseye required a scanner powerful enough to register the pattern and a computer cheap enough to sit in a store. And in 1949, neither existed at a price anyone could afford. The scanner alone would have needed a 500-watt light source just to work. So the 2 inventors did what people with a good idea and no market often do. They sold it. In 1952, they sold the patent to a company called Philco for $15,000 for the idea that would eventually put stripes on every physical object bought and sold on the planet. Near-death number 1. The idea that changes the world spends 20 years in a filing cabinet, owned by a company that never does anything with it. Woodland didn't give up. He took a job at IBM, specifically betting that a company with that much engineering muscle would eventually build what his idea needed. He was right. He just had to wait 18 more years for the rest of the industry to admit they needed it. By the late 1960s, American supermarkets had the same problem Wallace Flint identified in 1932. Now worse. More products, more variety, longer lines, rising labor costs. In 1969, the grocery industry formed the Ad Hoc Committee for a Uniform Grocery Product Identification Code, with McKinsey consultants brought in to define the standard. Then the real fight started. Whose symbol, whose pattern of stripes would win? This wasn't small. Whoever won would effectively own the technology behind checkout systems for a generation. 9 companies entered, including Litton, Pitney Bowes, Singer, and Plessy. But it came down to 2 giants, RCA and IBM. RCA had the head start and the personal connection. They built their proposal around Woodland's own bullseye design and partnered with Kroger for a real-world trial. In July 1972, RCA-equipped scanners went live in a Kroger store in Cincinnati, an 18-month pilot. It didn't go smoothly. The circular pattern looked elegant on paper. In practice, it kept smudging on the printing presses, making it unreliable to scan. RCA had the head start and the pedigree. It also had a fatal flaw showing up in real stores in real time. Meanwhile, at IBM, an engineer named George Laurer had a different idea. And here's the twist. One of the people helping steer IBM's rival proposal was Norman Joseph Woodland himself, the same man who'd drawn the original bullseye in the sand 24 years earlier, now working for the company about to try to kill his own design. Laurer ditched the circle for a rectangle, vertical black and white stripes, easier to print cleanly, easier to scan, small enough for a pack of gum. Near death number 2. The inventor's own original design gets marked for elimination by the inventor's own employer. The final decision came down to one meeting. On March 30th, 1973, in a hotel near Grand Central Station, the Symbol Selection Committee met to choose once and for all. They'd already asked MIT scientists to independently evaluate the rival proposals. Committee Chair Alan Haberman opened by asking each member one blunt question. How sure are you we're about to choose correctly? Because once this gets decided, it isn't getting undecided. They chose IBM's rectangle. On April 1st, 1973, the Universal Product Code, the UPC, was officially born. 24 years after a man dragged his fingers through wet sand on a Miami beach, his idea finally had a standard, a backer, and a name. It still didn't have a single customer. Quick pause before we get to how a pack of gum saved this whole thing. If you want the next case file, we're doing the $14 trillion shipping container next. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Okay, back to 1973. Having a standard is one thing. Getting a nervous, cost-conscious industry to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on untested scanners is another. Retailers weren't convinced the machines would pay for themselves. One widely cited estimate said a store would need at least 75% of its products barcoded just to break even. Labor unions worried the machines were designed to cut checkout jobs. Shoppers doubted a laser beam could correctly charge them for a can of soup. Near death number 3. Everybody agrees the technology works, and nobody wants to be the one who pays to find out. Somebody had to go first. That somebody was a small supermarket chain in Ohio. On the morning of June 26, 1974, a Marsh supermarket in Troy installed the first working UPC scanner system in the country, built by NCR and Spectra Physics. Overnight, Staff had hand-labeled the store, item by item, getting ready for opening. At 8:01 a.m., Marsh executive Clyde Dawson reached into a cart, picked a 10-pack of Wrigley's Juicy Fruit gum, not randomly, he later admitted, but as a nod to how much support Wrigley's team had given the project, and handed it to cashier Sharon Buchanan. She passed it over the scanner.
Okay, thanks.
Beep. 67 cents. Instantly, correctly, automatically. No hand-stamped sticker, no manual entry. 25 years, almost to the day, after a grad school dropout drew 4 lines in Miami Beach sand, that pack of gum became the first item in history sold by Barcode. It wasn't just a checkout scan. It was a translation layer going live for the first time. The moment every physical object on the shelf became something a computer could instantly read and act on. Everything downstream, real-time inventory, modern supply chains, the ability for a store to stock 50,000 different items without drowning, starts right here at 8:01 a.m. with a stick of gum. From there, it spread fast. Mass merchandisers like Kmart adopted it early and aggressively. A store selling tens of thousands of products simply couldn't survive on hand pricing forever. Hospitals put barcodes on wristbands and medication to cut fatal dosing errors. Airlines put them on boarding passes. Every warehouse on the planet now runs on them. None of that works without those stripes. Woodland lived to see all of it. He died in 2012 at 91, having watched an idea he sold for $15,000 become the invisible backbone of the global economy. Read roughly 5 billion times a day. Next time you hear that beep, you'll know what it actually is. The sound of a 25-year fight nobody outside a hotel conference room ever knew was happening.